there are 4 interviews, and they're all tied to the accuser. The FBI was able somehow, or she was able to overcome the questions that anybody would have about this woman, about her credibility. That's the shocking thing, is that the FBI seems to have believed that this woman, there was something to her claim. Ghislaine Maxwell has 4 interviews. They gave us just 1 and allowed her to retain the other 3 while she's angling for a pardon. So potentially, depending on what's in there, right? Potential blackmail over the sitting president of the United States.
You could help build the only independent news outlet, always on the ground with the people for as low as 16 cents a day.
Corporate media, they've been lying to us for years, and you're going straight to the people.
Flint, Michigan, Washington,
Brooklyn, New York.
Government sending one more you to the residents of Chicago.
We need as many independent voices as possible, and that's why what you guys do is so important.
Covering what the corporate media covers up.
Hey, it's JT Cestkowski with Status Coup. I'm joined today by the independent journalist Roger Sollenberger, who has a Substack under his own name, Roger Sollenberger on Substack, that I encourage you all to go and check out and get subscribed to, because, Roger, you have been doing incredible work on the Epstein files. The biggest revelation, at least to my eyes, that you have found, and I think that you're getting more and more mainstream media recognition for this work that you have done, is identify in the files some documents related to a credible Trump accuser of abuse that have not been released publicly. How did this story first come to your attention?
Yeah, I just probably like a whole lot of people like yourself was curious about whether there really is a Trump accusation in there that might be believable. And, there was one accusation that some people had flagged. I believe Julie K. Brown mentioned this actually to David Remnick in the New Yorker. And at the time that she had said that, I had just, started working on the story itself. Like, I had seen it too. And the thing that I caught was that the woman, the accusation, appears on this PowerPoint slideshow. Very millennial, right? But it was an internal FBI presentation. And it's really comprehensive. It was put together just last summer, right around the time that Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, was going to go meet with Ghislaine Maxwell for that proffer session in the prison. And they were building this thing. It was like 21 slides on this show. And there's a slide that says prominent names. And it's got a number of people, but the first person on there is Donald Trump. And there were 2 bullet points next to his name. The first one was this accusation, and it's a pretty graphic allegation, right? So he had allegedly forced this 13 to 15-year-old girl at the time, back in the early to mid 80s, by the way. So 1983 to 1985 is when this allegedly took place, and forced her allegedly to give him oral sex. She bit him, and then he punched her, it says, and kicked her out. And the thing that's, notable about this to me that leapt out is when the Epstein files were first released in December, the DOJ said, hey, here are all these crazy allegations in here. Heads up, everybody. They're false claims, and they were made just before the 2020 election, and they're outrageous. And, it's true that a lot of claims on that slide that they were talking about when they released it, a lot of those claims are outrageous. But this one is different, because this one was made by the accuser to the FBI. And it found its way onto this PowerPoint years later, right? A summary of the entire Epstein files, right? This presentation was just tip to tail, really comprehensive. And in the prominent name slide, they include this one and then the second one. So I was like, wait a minute. The FBI found somebody who was credible enough that they interviewed her, is what it looks like. And that's when the light went off for me. Like, wait a minute, no one has reported this. The FBI interviewed a woman who accused Trump of raping her when she was a child. And so I looked into this accusation, it was actually on that first, spreadsheet or whatever with the outrageous claims. It's the first one on the sheet. And these others, the FBI, when they get a tip, they don't write it off immediately. This is a credible allegation, an allegation that I should say that the FBI found credible. Now, credible does not mean true. Credible does not mean verified. You're a journalist. All the journalists I know, we get credible tips all the time from credible people that don't check out for one reason or the other. Maybe they're false. Maybe you just can't can't hit that bar to publish it, can't confirm it, whatever. But like you don't write the person off, right? So the FBI clearly found this to be a credible accuser, an accusation worth discussing. And then I learned after I found that out that they hadn't interviewed her just one time. They interviewed her 4 times.
Can you explain how you figured out that they had interviewed her 4 times? Because I think that gets to a lot of the crux, whether or not this accusation is true against the president. Just the fact that you're able to find out this information and that some of these other interviews are not contained in the files, but someone else has them, I think is some more damning information. Can you explain how you found those others?
Yeah, that was kind of crazy. After I found the accuser and I found this 302, it's got a stamp, a Bates. It's got 3 sets of Bates stamps actually. These Bates stamps are if you have a huge case, you have to stamp each paper, and then you create your own pagination. It's a reference point, right? So you have millions of pages, whatever. They each have their own page, so you can just go through them chronologically or whatever. This one had a number on it that said 3501.045, 45th president, maybe, I don't know. But that was the number associated with it. So I'm like, okay, well, let me see what other information, if I search this in the Epstein files, if anything else comes up. And this 350, I was like, okay, so I got some of the stuff, but I'm like, clearly there are documents missing here. That clearly there's the numbers jump. There's just gaps in the documents. So it's out of order. I'm like, all right, so we're missing documents somewhere. And I didn't know what they were. So I was like, well, let me search 3502, right? And when I searched 3502, I got this manifest, just a bunch of these manifests of evidence that were handed over to Ghislaine Maxwell. And I finally narrowed it down. I was like, oh, okay, so there's a spreadsheet that I was like, where's 3501? That's crazy. It doesn't exist. But I narrowed it down. I was like, okay, so there is this spreadsheet. I found out what it would be. And I was like, it's just not there. So there is this evidence, a whole index of a bunch of evidence that they had handed over to Ghislaine Maxwell, not the evidence itself, but just a list of it, right? So that she could have it for her trial and they could organize it and hey, here's how it's numbered for you, a reference. So I was looking for this spreadsheet, didn't exist. And I found a site, epstein-data.com, and I plugged in the 3501 number there. They had the original. So this spreadsheet had been released. It was available at one point. But by the time I was searching for this woman, the spreadsheet had been deleted from the public database. But I plugged it into the Wayback Machine, and there it was. There was the spreadsheet. And I was like, oh, wow, this is what they gave Ghislaine about this accuser. And lo and behold, there are 4 interviews, and they're all tied to the accuser. Now, you can see in other documents that there probably are 4 interviews with this person, but you can't make it one-to-one. This document had 2 things. One is this is definitely the same woman. It lines up with the number and the 4 interviews, right? So we don't have 3 of them. The other thing that's important about this document is it means that Ghislaine Maxwell has 4 interviews. They gave us just 1 and allowed her to retain the other 3 while she's angling for pardon. So potentially, depending on what's in there, right, potential blackmail over the sitting president of the United States who holds the keys to her freedom. That's pretty astounding to me. So I published it, and I was like, why don't we have these? What is the reason that we don't have those interviews, but Ghislaine Maxwell does? And we still don't have those interviews, by the way. Still haven't been released. Who knows? The explanation DOJ is giving, kind of nonsense to me. But we can get there later if you got any follow-ups on that.
I want to start though by addressing, you just saying there, we don't have these other 3 interviews. Ghislaine Maxwell has them, but The Guardian has now done some reporting on apparently what is in those interviews, claiming that they have seen about 25 pages of documents that are these interview summaries. What was your reaction when you read that reporting, and what questions still remain to you after you saw that The Guardian is reporting that what's in those interviews is apparently some salacious claims that seem maybe a little fantastical?
How do I, as a journalist, I don't understand why The Guardian didn't print the 302s if they have them.
Right.
Doesn't make any sense to me. But why they would choose instead to characterize them without sharing them also seems, I can't understand that. But I think the important thing that we all need to remember here is that there is an authority on child sex trafficking investigations in this country. It's the FBI, Child Exploitation Task Force. It's the agents in the FBI in which we vest this authority. The experts on this, who know all of this woman's background, they've got more than the Guardian people at their keyboards have when they were interviewing her. They knew all this stuff. They brought her back for multiple interviews, according to The Guardian, multiple interviews in which she discusses the Trump allegations, right? So we know that they're in those interviews. We know there's salacious allegations. We know they kept talking to her. And we also know from an email sent last summer, July 22, 2025, again, just before Blanche meets Maxwell, there's an internal FBI email that is, again, talking about prominent names. And it says, positive case hits in the Epstein file. That email says there's a woman who accused Trump of sexual abuse as a minor, but, quote, ultimately refused to cooperate. So the FBI took in all this information itself, and their conclusion was, we want this woman to cooperate with us on an investigation into Donald Trump at the least, right? Like, we want her to keep coming. We actually have something. So we don't know what this woman was able to provide, what maybe a friend or someone from her childhood or, what the FBI could find out that might be corroborative, right? We have no idea. We only know that the FBI seems to have concluded that there's some merit here, enough merit, it seems, to want to cooperate with the accuser in a child sex trafficking investigation into the sitting president at the time, right? That's not small potatoes. Total of 62 pages with all the interviews and notes, apparently, according to NPR. 62 total. The Guardian and Breitbart got 25. So what is the rest of that? And what are in these interviews that were unredacted? This is another important question, because there are actually 2 versions of these documents. There's the version that was given to Ghislaine for her trial. Those are redacted. The first interview that we have, there are 3 paragraphs that have been completely redacted from that interview. I don't know what's in them, but there's an original FBI version of the 302 that they gave to Ghislaine that's stamped for her trial, with that Bates stamp on there. So there's original versions, and we don't have those either. And this is another question about breaking the law. Like, we know you gave them to Ghislaine. We know they're responsive to the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Why didn't you give those to us? And, why didn't you give us the originals in addition to those, which they should have? Just the stuff on the Ghislaine index, we don't know if that's the full universe of documents associated with this woman. We don't know what else she gave them, what else they may have been able to find on their own, perhaps, maybe what a friend told them, or they found another girl. She says that other girls were involved when, Epstein was the one who first sunk his claws into her, according to her interview. And by the way, the FBI and DOJ consider her an Epstein victim. So yes, there's questions about her story for sure. There's always questions about everybody's story, especially from this long ago. There's all sorts of ways that this could get lost or misremembered or whatever, right? And made up. It doesn't sound like she's just inventing it, but maybe, but the FBI, DOJ was convinced that she was an Epstein victim. So, if you're splitting this between Epstein and Trump, maybe you can say, hey, the FBI was wrong. I don't believe it. That's bullshit. Like, that's your prerogative. That's totally fine. But what we're concerned with is what the DOJ thought at the time, what they have, and what they're hiding now. It's all in that universe.
Yeah, just to underscore and summarize a little bit of what you're saying, I mean, it's basically that there's like 3 different layers of holy shit here. The topmost, like the most obvious, is that there is this credible accusation against the president for abusing an underage girl. But as you say, not proven, got to take it with a grain of salt. So then below that, we have, okay, then there's all these details about this allegation that are not public that Ghislaine Maxwell has. In theory, she has the answers to a lot of these questions that we have, which gives her potential leverage over the sitting president of the United States. And even if you want to take the most charitable interpretation here, which is that there's nothing in these documents that could be used in that way, you still have the base layer here, which is that these are documents that seem like they should be subject to the Epstein Transparency Act that have not been released. And it's just this problem on top of problem on top of problem with this story. With something so big here, Roger, I am trying to think of a tactful way to say this.
Yeah, can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
So we don't have to, and people might want to, which is fine. And again, I'm not telling you how to analyze this, but a helpful way to keep things really clean and straight, and to avoid straying into speculation, to let your opinion of something, like the woman does have a criminal history, for instance. The FBI overcame that somehow, is the point, right? The FBI was able somehow, or she was able to overcome the questions that anybody would have about this woman, about her credibility, about all that. She didn't qualify for the Epstein Victims Fund, for instance, when she sued Epstein, got a paid settlement, right? But and that's a very specific list. We don't know why, but certain things on there are like non-starters, and we know things like, well, she didn't have stuff written down, for instance. She says that. She's open about that. This woman has never come forward about Donald Trump, ever. She's never sought, that we know of, has never, at least publicly, filed a lawsuit against him, has never sought media attention, seems to have disappeared. I know who she is, and disappeared. I don't mean that in a nefarious way. She seems like she's scared. Her attorney, she hired an attorney for the first interview who was not an Epstein lawyer. We learned again from The Guardian. So she didn't go seek out Lisa Bloom or Gloria Allred or anyone high profile. The first person that she got was a local attorney in Vancouver, Washington, a criminal defense attorney who sat with her in her first interview. And again, the thing to remember, if you're worried about being delicate or whatever, it's what the FBI thought, right? That's the shocking thing, is that the FBI seems to have believed that this woman, there was something to her claim. It's pretty crazy when you just look at what we have. You don't have to stray outside of the lines here. You don't have to speculate. That to me is just mind-blowing.
Just for your own reference here, Andrew, 2 more questions from me. I'm just keeping an eye on the time here, so just so that you're aware. I want to talk a little bit about the Department of Justice's response. You alluded to it earlier. They seem to try and act as though there's nothing here, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain sort of approach here. Can you walk us through what their response to your reporting has been thus far?
They've never replied to me, and I didn't expect they would. I worked at the Daily Beast for 3 years and would get replies there, boilerplate, often comment, or, this a standard, just like, hey, we don't discuss ongoing investigations, things like that. I didn't think that they would deign to respond to an independent reporter about something like this. They'd prefer not to acknowledge it, and so that's what they've done. I've never gotten a comment, but I did anticipate what they might be trying to do here with this little shell game that they're playing in the courts. And I went and I looked at the docket and I looked for exactly this thing that appears in the footnote where I'm like, oh my God, they're pretending that this protective order governing Ghislaine's material, they're pretending that there's something complicated here and that, it's tough. We have to pull these and hold them. We're just vetting all these documents. This whole dispute that's on the SDNY docket with Judge Paul Engelmeyer, it looks like that footnote to me, says most of this is bullshit. Most of this is completely unnecessary. The footnote says, hey, we've got a whole bunch of these things in the original case files, and those aren't subject to the protective order, and thus are not Maxwell protective order materials. It says it right there. That captures these documents, So after my story, I wrote this in my very last report, which I published a week ago on last Sunday. And I mentioned this because I'm anticipating this is how the FBI, DOJ is going to respond if media outlets do eventually pick up the story, which they did the next day, by the way. NPR and MS Now reported the next day, and DOJ ends up putting out a statement that mentions these duplicative records in the Maxwell case. And, it's like, that is what, at least one of the things that they're trying to pull here to keep these shielded from the people. I don't know, there's probably more floodgates than one, I would imagine, but who knows? But that, that seems to be just false on its face. And they don't even explain. They give us, 3 different options. This is why I'm saying the explanation seems like nonsense to me, because here are the possibilities. We've got 3 different possibilities for this is why. It's like, well, which one is it? Right? Is it that they're duplicative? Is it that there's an ongoing federal investigation, or are you citing privilege? Those are the 3 possibilities. They won't commit themselves to one of them. So you got to maybe think that they might be, holding on to different excuses down the line to keep dragging this on. I think it's very clear by now that whatever's in those documents, they don't want to release them. And it's probably because they sound believable, or at least believable enough to FBI agents, who do this for a living. That would be my bet. And again, Guardian, come on, fucking print them. Why didn't you print them?
I want to invite you to take a victory lap if you want to do it. And if you don't, I'll just cut this part out of the video, and that's fine. But there have been many outlets that have now followed your reporting that have confirmed everything that you have laid out here for us. They've done it themselves independently, which is just such a sign that you were onto something before anybody else. But you're a one-man band here, Roger. I want you to maybe address, why did this end up falling to you? There were so many people going through these documents in such fine detail, and this ended up being your story that you caught many days after the files had been released. Why do you think it is that this ended up being your scoop to get?
There's a long version of that story, but the short version is I was able to confirm that this was the same person who made the claims, right? Tied that together. And that's really the foundation of the whole thing. But, to be honest, right now, it's just, I don't care. I mean, being an independent journalist and, having the experience that I have and having the experience with standards that I have, the experience with being able to like frame a story properly, appropriately, I'm confident putting out these reports. And I just sort of suspected that I would have a pretty hard time getting there as a freelancer with some outlet. And I wanted to get this up as quickly as I could because I found it, and I had some bad experience as a freelancer, and I didn't want this story to be someone else's version of it. I wanted the true and honest report because I felt it was that significant that I didn't want anybody else to take teeth out of it or whatever. And I was like, it has to be out there first that way, And I am so happy that other outlets are confirming it. I don't care about getting cited. It doesn't matter. I found this and I was just shocked at what was here in front of our faces. And that story is so much bigger than any one person. It is a huge story that requires a lot of people a lot smarter than me trying to figure out, well, how do we push this forward? How do we get the answers here? How do we hold people accountable to this? How does this move forward from just recognizing that these things are missing and that appears to be illegal that they're missing? Okay, well, what happens here? How do we force that issue? And I'm just very happy that people are taking this story as seriously as they have been.
All right, let's end things on where people can find you, how they can follow your work, and anything else you want to leave people with.
Oh yeah, just go to my Substack and check that out. I'm out of journalism, by the way. I lost my taste for it. I am a father, and I've been hanging out and doing some writing and some different work, right? And just not doing journalism. And I found this, and I was like, well, I have to report that. I have to report this one. So all that stuff is free. All the work that I've put into this, which is a lot of work, is all free. And so if you subscribe or whatever, and I take your subscription fee, I'm probably not going to be putting out a whole lot more journalism. And I don't want to just take people's money for really no return on the other end. But that said, if you appreciate it, I've got a GoFundMe. You can throw in like an appreciation tip or whatever for the work that has already been done. I'd be grateful, but you don't have to do that. This was my choice to do it this way. But yeah, it's just on the Substack under my name, Roger Sollenberger. I think it's Sollenberger RC would be the handle. But it's really just, where does the story go next? And please don't forget about this one.